Our second lesson today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11, which can be found on page 3 in your Pew Bibles or pages 248 in your Spark Bible. I invite you to listen with new ears, to try to suspend what we might already know about this passage, to listen, acknowledging our baggage as we come into the text, maybe our suspicion or our confidence or our own perspective. And now let us invite the Spirit of God to open our minds to new discovery. In the Gospel of Matthew we read, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, 'If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread.' But he answered, 'It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.' Then the devil, the accuser, took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, 'If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone.' Jesus said to him, 'Again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test.' Again, the devil, the slanderer, took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and all of their splendor, and said to him, 'All of these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me.' And Jesus said to him, 'Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve Him only.' Then the devil, the adversary, left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind or another, his mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. And that very night, in Max's room grew a forest. And it grew and grew until his ceiling hung with vines, and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max. And he sailed off through the night and day and in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. It's obvious you recognize this. So begins the iconic adventures of Max in Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. And from this beginning, we know that Max sets out on his adventure into the wildest of wilderness, surrounded by the beastiest of beasts and the weirdest of wild things that threaten to eat him up. And as he went into the wilderness, he found many unexpected things along the way in this unexpected place. And what drove him into this unexpected wilderness was the thought that somehow he wasn't loved and accepted as he was, where he was, so he went to find it in another place and in other creatures. And what Max discovers along the way was that he had already had what he was looking for all along, this love and acceptance. And he found those things when he returned home, where a warm meal was waiting for him all along. And just as Max began his journey through the wilderness, so too we begin ours in the wilderness. The text for the first Sunday of Lent and each of the 3 lectionary cycles for the church come from each of the 3 synoptic gospels. And it's the story of Jesus' journey into the wilderness. This year, as you just heard, our story comes to us from the Gospel of Matthew. So it would seem as though it is important and appropriate for us to begin our journey here too, here in the wilderness of these long 40 days of Lent. And throughout this season of Lent at Northminster Presbyterian Church, we are going to journey together through some unexpected places where the divine is encountered. We will begin together here in the wilderness and end in a garden at an empty tomb. Our travels, much like our lives, will take many unforeseen twists and unusual turns, but together we will be attentive for the presence of the Christ as we journey. We will experience a nighttime encounter, a conversation at an ancient well, healing along the road, life at a funeral, waving palms at an impromptu parade. But today, we begin here in the wilderness. This morning's text is heavy laden with multiple possibilities of interpretations and understandings and directions to go. And it is up to us to pick a place to begin. Where do we start? To choose a way into the text, so to speak. So let's start here. The author of the Gospel of Matthew places what is commonly referred to as the temptation of Jesus right after Jesus' baptism by his distant relative, John the Baptist. Immediately preceding our text for this morning are these words spoken from heaven. The voice of God rings out, "This is my Son, the Beloved, with whom I am well pleased." It's a familiar refrain. We've all heard it before. But consider what this must have sounded like to the original hearers of these words. So hear it again without the artificial chapter breaks between what we know as chapter 3 and what we know as chapter 4. This is how it goes in its context. "And when Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, 'This is my Son, the Beloved, with whom I am well pleased.' Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. And the tempter came to him and said, 'If you are the Son of God.'" From the Jordan River, with the words of divine blessing ringing in his ears, Jesus is led into the wilderness, a place of loneliness, an abandoned place, a deserted location, alone. Why? What is the purpose of such a shift? Well, much like any religious leader of antiquity or hero, Jesus had to face struggle and trial before he began the public portion of his life, his journey. And we all know that the wilderness can be a place of escape and adventure, but we also know it to be a place of challenge and struggle. And here, in this wild place where all the wild things are, Jesus is tempted, tested. And as Jesus enters the wilderness, we, the hearers and the readers, are invited to consider our own places of isolation, our own deserted places where our hunger is deep and our loneliness is real, and where we may even sense a bit of abandonment. And we all know these places. They are those moments and spaces where we feel the most vulnerable. They will be different for each one of us, for we each have our own, and you are likely thinking of some right now. It is in these spaces where our greatest insecurities and needs can be manipulated and misused. It is in these places where we may even sense a distance from the divine. It is in these places and spaces of isolation, wilderness, where we, like Jesus, often face the accuser, the tempter, the imposter, the one who slanders our identity. In our text and in texts like it, we have given a name to this adversary. We have called it the devil. And throughout the history of Christianity, we've even personified it. However, the word itself in our text means accuser, tempter, imposter, slanderer, adversary. If we're honest, we're all familiar with that. And we all know that in reality, the one who accuses, the one who slanders, the real imposter, is most often not some force that rests out in the world somewhere just waiting to take advantage of our weakness. Now, maybe it's just me, but that which tempts, falsely accuses, and slanders the most dwells right next to me. Sometimes even within. And the imposter's best lie, its most effective deception, is to make us question our identity, to entice us to consider, just maybe, we are what we do, our successes and our failures, but honestly, most often, our failures. And this imposter, this false accuser, this slanderer, tries to convince us that the truth of our core identity is somehow not enough. Listen again to how the accuser approaches Jesus in our text. The first and the second temptations begin in the same way. To Jesus, the one whom the voice of God, remember, just proclaimed, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." To that Jesus, the voice of the accuser says, "If you are the Son of God." It is as if the slanderer is saying, if you indeed are who you have been proclaimed to be, who you think you are, then prove it. The audacity. Does it sound familiar? It should, for it's also revealed to us in our text from Genesis this morning, where the poet imagines humanity in its purest form, listening again to the voice of the accuser. The imposter somehow convinces them, and us, to believe that the divine breath that animates their very being and all of humanity with them is somehow not enough. That there is something more they should have that we should have. Something else that will finally allow us to become more fully us. And this reading is often called the fall or original sin. And I've found myself wondering if that sin actually isn't the disobedience, the eating of the fruit, but rather our internal and seemingly eternal struggle to actually believe and embody that we already have all that we need in our core identity as the beloved of God, the divine image bearers, the ones animated by the very breath and Spirit of God. And when we find that we cannot believe this truth, We search to fill ourselves and fulfill ourselves with things that are temporal, but can never replace the beauty breathed into us by the truth revealed at the baptism of Jesus, the truth revealed at our own. This is the child of God, the beloved, with whom God is well pleased. That is enough. There's nothing to prove and nothing to add. Our story from Matthew ends with Jesus, secure in his identity, silencing the accuser. And through Jesus, and because of Jesus, and through the waters of baptism, because of the truth of our identity, we can do the same. Now, there's one more thing about this text that I want us to notice this morning. And it's something that probably often goes unnoticed because it's tucked in at the end of the text. After 40 days, which in Scripture, by the way, always means a long time, after a fast, a journey in the wilderness, after facing accusations of the tempter, something beautiful happens. Our text ends this way. Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. Angels came and tended to Jesus. Now, we likely have images of heavenly winged creatures in glowing white, taking care of the one who has just been through the worst of the wilderness. However, there's another way to understand what is happening here. The word we use, angel, is actually just a transliteration of the Greek word into English. But the Greek word actually means a messenger, or one who announces. So the question that I've been left with is this: what could these messengers be announcing? Now, I'm not saying it's the case, but it's fun to consider. What if their announcement was the same one that echoed from the clouds at Jesus' baptism just 40 days before? What if the message the messengers brought the weary and hungry Jesus through both their words and their actions was a reminder of his identity, which had just been under attack? You are the beloved, with whom God is well pleased. You are the beloved, with whom God is well pleased. You are the beloved, with whom God is well pleased. Friends, these 40 days of Lent will be long. We'll find ourselves in many unexpected places and spaces along the way. Some of these may even feel like wilderness. We may experience isolation and loneliness in these deserted places. We may begin to question our identity, the core of who we are. But the good news is that there is one who has gone before us, who has experienced this long, arduous journey. And the promise is that even in felt absence, we are not alone. For the divine accompanies us wherever we find ourselves, and each one of us, every single one of us, has messengers, angels, if you will, who remind us each and every day about who we are. These are the ones who speak the truth of our identity into our lives through their words, their presence, and their actions. You know who they are for you. So this Lent, maybe we should make it our practice to listen closer to their voices, heed their reminders, for the truth that they speak will never change. Maybe this Lent We fast from listening to the voice of the accuser and pay attention to our messenger's message. You are the beloved, with whom God is well pleased. Max stepped into his private boat, waved goodbye, and sailed back over a year, in and out of weeks and through a day, and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him, and it was still hot. Amen.